Good morning and welcome back. I'm Lynn Cullen. This is Newstalk 1250 WTAE. Perusing my newspapers a little while back, happened to come upon what's called a point of view column by a gentleman who was identified as a former special education teacher. And this was in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Right.
And it was, I think, to say the least, the adjective that would apply is provocative. It was headlined, Special Olympics Teaches the Wrong Skills, and Keith Story was the author of that article. He joins me in the studio, as does Joe Murray, who is the manager of the Special Olympics for Allegheny County. And if I may, just I'm going to do an oral rendition of just one of the paragraphs that I think somewhat sums up what Keith Story was saying. He says the Special Olympics started when there was very little programming of any sort for people with handicaps, but it is no longer appropriate. It reinforces negative stereotypes, does not teach functional skills, is not normalizing, and does not allow people with handicaps to function in normal society. That's one of your sort of summing it up paragraphs. I would think that this article has garnered you quite a bit of negative reaction from people? I mean, the letters to the editor.
Reaction.
I mean, 2 days or 3 days later, the letters to the editor started pouring in, and they seemed. I mean, they were all negative, the ones that were printed. So
I think you get a real mixed reaction when you point out some of the flaws in the Special Olympics. I see the Special Olympics as kind of the sacred cow for special education. It's been around since 1968, and as I pointed out, it started when there was really nothing available as far as services for people with disabilities. But as the civil rights movement has gone from integration for minorities and women, it's now gone to the point of trying to integrate people with disabilities into society. And society's changed very drastically over the last 20 years as far as integrating people with disabilities. It used to be that if you were disabled, you lived in an institution, or you lived at home and went to a segregated school, and when you became an adult, you went to a sheltered workshop. So your existence was pretty much around other people with disabilities. And now we've integrated these people into society, so they go to neighborhood schools with non-disabled students. When they become adults, they have regular jobs that regular people have, so they're out in the community. They live in apartments or houses in the community, so we're integrating them into the community at large. And I think it's been an extension of the civil rights movement.
And you see the Special Olympics as a segregating influence.
Right. I think it's something that hasn't progressed over the years along with the rest of the integration movement.
You were at one time involved in Special Olympics?
Right, back in the 70s when I was in high school and college.
Okay. As I mentioned, Keith Story is a former special education teacher. He is now at Western Psychiatric Institute, where he is a research coordinator for an early childhood intervention program. He does have a doctorate in special education. Joe Murray also joining us, as I said, the Allegheny County manager of the Special Olympics. Joe, did you see this, or I'm sure somebody quickly phoned you, or it was pointed out to you?
Yes, I got phone calls from it. I was out of town when the article was printed, and I was very offended by the whole article. It's an article that should have been written 15 years ago, or 10 years ago max. But as far as today, it's totally outdated. As far as the viewpoint, there are a number of things in the article that I find very offensive. As a parent, as a professional, as I was a teacher, and as the county manager for Special Olympics in Allegheny County now.
Well, let's get specific about the things that you find offensive. Just talking about Keith's contention that in an age when the movement is toward integration of people with disabilities and or handicaps, and he's saying that this event segregates.
In my mind, he doesn't have his facts straight. An example that I could give right from the start, when the article was published, I was on a trip to Villanova with 21 athletes from Allegheny County, and as far as integration in the regular community, shall we say, I mean, I don't. We get into labels as a society, but we stayed in a regular Holiday Inn. We ate dinner with the regular folks in the Holiday Inn. We ate dinner at a Grand Round. We traveled as any other group would travel on a tour. Okay, we competed under federation soccer rules. We competed in federation type games. The games that we were involved in. I'm kind of jumping, moving ahead on some of the other topics, but we competed in regular games. One team won, one team lost. They were both of the teams that we brought from Allegheny County were involved in sudden death overtime games, and so it wasn't a case where both teams went away as winners. They were sudden death games, and one team won, and one team happened to lose.
That was one of the points that Keith brought up. The Special Olympics, what everybody ends up winning, and that's not the real world. You're saying that's.
I'm just taking you one example, one snapshot of a weekend, and one team lost and one team won. We stayed in a regular motel. We integrated with the regular college students at Villanova during lunch. We ate lunch in a cafeteria with the rest of the students that were on campus that weekend, and then we came home that Sunday evening.
Keith is one of the letter writers who also did not agree with your letter, although he did say you had a few legitimate points. Joel Benucci of Beachview wrote that Special Olympics was not intended to teach functional living skills. It offers handicapped and disabled people an opportunity to compete, to have some success, and to feel good about themselves. What's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with that. You want to look at the outcomes for the people with disabilities. They need functional skills so that they can be successful in society. And as far as outcomes go for people, I think one of the most important is integration. And when I think about integration, I think of 4 types of integration: physical integration, social networks, and relationships. And as Joe was saying, you get some amount of physical integration with the Special Olympics, eating in a cafeteria with non-disabled people. That's physical integration. But what we found is that physical integration doesn't necessarily lead to social integration. And what we want is people with and without disabilities interacting with each other in a reciprocity relationship so that it's equal. And I don't think you get that with the Special Olympics. When they interact with non-disabled people, they're generally in the role of the athlete and the coach, where the coach is the person without disabilities and is in kind of the dominating relationship, and the athlete is less able and more dependent upon the coach. And what we want is more of an equal relationship, so we can get social networks among the people with and without disabilities. So they're interacting on a daily basis or a frequent basis.
But in the real world, a coach and an athlete relationship is not an equal relationship.
Right. So I don't think that's the best way to get friendships and social networks, because generally I've played a lot of sports, and you become friends with other athletes rather than the coach. The coach is the dominant person. So in the Special Olympics, all the other athletes are disabled. So you're not really getting that integration as far as people with and without disabilities. So I don't think that the Special Olympics is a vehicle for getting the outcomes of integration.
Go ahead, Joe.
The other real blatant example that I can give is if you examine the population of the people that are involved in the Special Olympics, the number of athletes we have. I can speak real specifically about Allegheny County, and I'll bring up examples of programs throughout the state. In Allegheny County, for example, we had a bowling tournament on Sunday where we had 191 bowlers. Okay, in some lanes there were bowlers who bowled as high as 190 on their score. They competed as a team, and their team score was 150. Okay, 3 lanes down from them were individuals who were severely and profoundly retarded, who were in wheelchairs, and my point is, within Special Olympics itself, there's a considerable amount of integration. If you simply take those individuals who bowled 190, okay, yes, they can compete in a regular bowling league, and Special Olympics does encourage that, and there are examples that I'll get to throughout the program. Okay, but within Special Olympics itself, the person who's severely and profoundly retarded, who's confined to a wheelchair, and who's, if you're clinically looking at it from an IQ standpoint, they're 80 points difference in IQ, and those 2 individuals are integrating and and together in the same place. Now
But they're not being integrated with people without disabilities. I mean, you've got
What is-
190
if you
people with
take-
disabilities. Is that really a normalized situation
for which person?
for any of the people?
For the person whose IQ is less than 10, they are integrating with people of significantly higher intelligence than they are.
But are they being integrated into society with people
So-
without disabilities?
But in my mind, the whole thing goes on a continuum. Okay? Another example would be,
See, I see it as it's not the person's IQ. It's the person as a person has the right to be integrated into society, into the mainstream, and live in the community and participate in the community. So
at what level can the person that's functioning on a very low level?
The profoundly retarded are not
Okay.
going to be integrated.
I disagree. I worked in Oregon on supported employment, which is getting people with very severe disabilities jobs in the community. And we worked with people with IQs as low as 10 who had medical problems, nonverbal deaf, working in jobs at plants alongside non-disabled people earning real money. So I think that it's not that these people can't participate in society and be mainstream. It's in the past we were not very good teachers. We did not integrate them in school life and did not give them the support to live and work in the community. So it's not that they can't do it. It's just that we haven't been good teachers in the past.
We're talking about, probably getting beyond Special Olympics and talking about integrating people with disabilities into the society as a whole, although we really are talking about whether or not the Special Olympics helps that purpose or serves a good purpose still. Is it outmoded? All of this is a result of an op-ed piece run in the local paper, by Keith Story, who is joining us along with Joe Murray, the Allegheny County manager of the Special Olympics. 333 WTAE is the number here. If you'd like to get involved in this discussion, please be my guest. I'm Lynn Cullen. This is News Talk 1250 WTAE. Welcome back. I'm joined in the studio again by Keith Story, who is a research coordinator at Western Psychiatric Institute, working with an early childhood intervention program. He is a former special education teacher, and he is critical of the Special Olympics program. Joe Murray, also here, Allegheny County's manager of the Special Olympics, and to say that these two gentlemen disagree would be an understatement, believe me. We've got an awful lot of callers on the line, and I would like to let them in, let them have their say, and let you gentlemen just respond to either their questions or their comments. Dan in Oakland, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm hearing an awful lot of black and white here, as if you're either integrated all your life or segregated all your life. I have a brother who's totally deaf and has been from birth, and he was brought up in an institution that thought that you had to learn to lip read as your only way of communication. That way you would communicate with normal people. And he ended up with a third grade IQ, and he came out of high school, or a third grade vocabulary. And he finally went to a school that allowed them to do sign language, and his vocabulary went up immensely. I think that what has helped deaf people, and this analogy might go over, is not forcing them to come into our crowd, but allowing them to have their deaf clubs and their own crowds, and getting us some consciousness so that we would move toward them and we would learn to operate the way they operate. I don't see Special Olympics as preventing anybody from being integrated, but allowing them to have their space, because we, in fact, are not integrating with them, and expecting them to do all the integrating with us while we continue to ignore them seems to be a gross miscarriage of the whole concept.
Good point, Dan. I mean, he says, why black and white? Why not, just be a little... anyone, go ahead, jump in.
I think that he has a very good point, that integration is not black and white. There is a lot of gray area, and I guess it kind of comes down to defining your terms. What is integration? When I think of integration, again, I think of physical, social integration, people with and without disabilities interacting with each other and forming friendships and social networks. And my question is, do you get that from the Special Olympics? If you don't, is the Special Olympics appropriate as far as getting integration?
But his point that his brother was actually hurt by, this feeling that his brother should be totally integrated into so-called normal society on its terms. And
my question to Keith would be, who do you choose as your best friends? I know that the three children that my wife and I have raised, their best friends are involved in Special Olympics. When they choose to have a Christmas party or a birthday party or a picnic during the summer, they choose their friends to come over. When they choose to go to a dance, whether it's a local dance in the community or a Special Olympics dance or whatever, they all have dates, and their girlfriends, or my two boys, their girlfriends are involved in Special Olympics as well. So their interaction on a social basis, that's where they find their friends, and that's where they've been involved with these same friendships, and they're very deep-seated friendships that have been involved for years and years, and they'll continue to be involved for years and years.
Right, but if you're only involved in the Special Olympics and only have access to people with disabilities, are you not limiting the choice of friendships?
Well, they also we lived in a community. We have their next-door neighbors, there's boys across the street. There's, and they play in the neighborhood, in the community, and these are the friends that they communicate better with, have the same interests, enjoy things. They have their own things that they talk about.
Keith, would you do away with Special Olympics altogether? Is that what you're saying?
I think I would. There's been an argument that's just recently been published as far as trying to integrate the Special Olympics, and because the philosophy of the Special Olympics is segregation, one author has proposed starting the Kennedy Olympics, which would allow integration of disabled and non-disabled people. But I think what we want is people with disabilities participating in typical recreational activities in the community, and I don't think you get that with the Special Olympics.
Fran, go ahead, please. Fran? Excuse me, Fran, my fault. Hello, you there?
Yes,
my fault.
my name is Fran. I have a daughter who is 19 and participates in Special Olympics. She just came back from Villanova. I don't agree at all with Mr. Story, but I would like to say that if he feels that everyone should be integrated, I think maybe they're trying to educate the wrong population. They always just earmark the special education, the Special Olympian. I'm sure the Special Olympian would love for that, but that just isn't the real world. And in the meantime, they should have something that they can participate in. And without the Special Olympics, there is nothing for them. She's 19 years old. I can't say what kind of a team is going to take a 19-year-old on to a soccer tournament. College, high school, there's no category for her.
Okay, there's several examples of things that have been integrated. In Oregon, they've started integrated teams as far as soccer and other sports things go, what's called the State Games of Oregon, where communities participate against each other, and there are several disabled students on the different teams. And also, I have another example of an athlete with Down syndrome who was into horseback riding and wanted to participate in the regular events rather than the Special Olympics. And he, being very stubborn, did participate in the regular events and came in third and fourth in the events. So often...
This is not, excuse me for a second,
Sure.
This is not at all contrary to Special Olympics philosophy. I have numerous examples that I can give you of individual athletes. There was a boy in the South Hills last year that played regular soccer for a local high school team. He was on the junior high team. He then played Special Olympics basketball, and then in the spring he chose to run a high school track. There's girls in the North Hills that do the same thing. And then there are, we don't have a program currently in Allegheny County, but there are programs throughout the state. There's a big Harrisburg project is a big project where it's a project where athletes on a high school level are encouraged, or the program is set up so that they both participate on an equal basis, and they're both it's a partners club, and they have a unified sports program.
You know, it occurred to me, I was sitting there listening to all of this, and you gentlemen are actively involved with people with disabilities, and most of us are not. I mean, most people who are listening to this, because we live in a very segregated society in that regard, are not. And it occurred to me, I was going to say, you know, if disabled people are going to have to be competing with the able-bodied in terms of recreation, they're going to be coming out on the losing end all the time, is what the thought was in my head. And then I remembered that as a reporter, I did a story once on somebody who, an athlete who has no arms, and because of thalidomide, and he is involved in the Special Olympics on an international level. and he has won many gold medals, international Special Olympics. But he was on the football team, the soccer team, and the swimming team of Slippery Rock University, and competed against able-bodied swimmers with arms, and on occasion would win, and clearly played on the soccer team. So I think sometimes those of us who don't have a lot of exposure to disabled people sometimes make assumptions about their skill level and their abilities that are so wrong.
And another point is that not everybody likes to participate in athletic events as far as their recreational preferences. And athletic events may not be the best way to get the friendships and social networks that we want.
Which is, again, Special Olympics does not say that every person who has a disability, mentally handicapped, belongs in Special Olympics. It's a program that's designed for individuals who choose to become involved in Special Olympics. And the athlete then chooses how much integration that they choose to do. If they choose to be on the high school team, then they choose to go to the high school team. Special Olympics doesn't say, well, if you choose to go there, then you'll never come back. They would like to go for a sport. That's fine. We encourage that.
333 WTAE is the phone number here. I'm Lynn Cullen. This is News Talk 1250 WTAE. Hi. The manager of the Special Olympics in Allegheny County, and Keith Story, who is an early childhood intervention program research coordinator at Western Psychiatric Institute. His article in his op-ed piece in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette prompted this hour because he wrote an extremely critical essay about the Special Olympics, essentially saying it was teaching the wrong skills and segregating the disabled, and we've been going round and round about that. There's not going to be any meeting of the minds here this morning. I can tell that. Go ahead, in the North Hills. Hello.
Hi, Lynn.
Go ahead. Hello.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Joe probably recognizes my voice. I was driving down the road today and heard the conversation and got quite upset. Got to a phone call here at the payphone and call. Mr. Story, I wanted to ask you, do you know what the original intent and what the intent of Special Olympics is? I keep hearing the word recreation.
I mean, as far as providing athletic opportunities for people with mental retardation.
That's right, to compete and train, and I think it's a misuse of the word recreation because if it was just recreation, yes, there are things in communities that are available for, quote, recreation, but Special Olympics trains and skills and offers a competitive atmosphere that if you want to integrate these people, you're way off base. There is no way that 90% of these people would have any opportunity to compete if you integrate them into the normal system. And I want to know what your athletic background is.
I mean, as far as playing football and basketball in high school and things like that, I did. I participate in softball. I like to lift weights, to swim, so I consider myself an athletic person.
Let's use softball as an example. These people with mental retardation and the majority of the people who compete in Special Olympics, would they be able to compete on the normal high school girls softball team or the boys baseball team?
It depends upon the individual person. I don't think you can group all these people together into one setting. And if they can't, then is it an appropriate way to try and get integration through baseball?
Well, now you go to all the other things that Special Olympics offers. Beyond the competition, the camaraderie, the ability to communicate, the ability to feel good about themselves. What opportunity, if you say that they can't make the athletic teams at the various schools, what opportunity are they then going to have to compete? What opportunity are they going to have to feel good about themselves, some pride and some esteem?
Okay, use one example that's being done in Eugene in the high schools as far as track events go. When you have different heats in the running events, rather than having the Special Olympics, the special education students may have Heat 2 or Heat 3 in the event, so that they're participating for their high school team, but running separate events. So I think that's one way to integrate them into athletic events.
Well, and what's wrong with that being their Special Olympics program?
But it's not the Special Olympics program. It's a regular high school athletic event. Why do it through the Special Olympics?
So what is that is exactly the goal of the Harrisburg project in Pennsylvania. And if I could set up a project like that in Western Pennsylvania, I would do it.
And I'd support you in doing it.
But I'm going to do it through Special Olympics. So now you're saying that because I label it Special Olympics, because I have that label, and that's where I get my funding, and that's where I get my volunteers to run the program, then you have offense to that. But if actually that is my goal, and I can have a program of that nature, you don't see it until I take the name Special Olympics away.
Well, I think can you get that through the Special Olympics?
Yes, definitely. That is one of our goals. within Special Olympics on a state level.
How many?
Is it possible? It occurs to me, Keith. Is it possible that Special Olympics has changed somewhat since you were involved in it?
Oh, sure, it's changed a lot since, but I don't think it's changed enough, and I don't think it can change
So at what
far
rate?
enough.
So at what rate do you change? Do you just you have something that's going well, and at one day you just close the door and stop, and the next day you open it and you're going in a totally different direction?
Well, is it going well? That would be my question. How many of the Special Olympics athletes regularly participate in community events that are integrated?
As many as choose to. Okay, bowling on Saturdays at Bowling City is in the regular community, and
But I don't consider 192 people with disabilities going to a bowling alley at once being an integrated activity.
Well, okay. Linda in Canonsburg, go ahead.
Hi. The only problem I have with Special Olympics is I think it takes away from all the other problems of the retarded. I have a retarded brother who's 41 years old, so I know a little bit about it. I think what you ought to emphasize is to society is just exactly what retardation is. I think that a lot of people don't understand it. They don't want retarded people in our society. And I really think that that's where the emphasis should be put. So I don't think there's anything really wrong with Special Olympics, except that it gets too much publicity, and it doesn't address the problems that retarded people have in their lives, especially as they get older. My brother's 41 years old, and there's nothing for him. He's not a child anymore. He's not cute anymore. He's a man with a lot of problems, and they just don't get addressed.
I agree with you. I think that as people get older and as adults in society, are a lot of the Special Olympics events appropriate? And for this person's brother, I think he needs a job and needs to have the support to participate in the community.
so what does he do during his off hours? In Allegheny County, our largest population of Special Olympic athletes is the over 30 age group.
Mm-hmm.
We have 250 individuals who are over 30 that are involved in Special Olympics. So what does that person who lives in a CLA and chooses to go, their options as far as recreation are to go to a recreation program run through their base service unit, or to go to Special Olympics, unless they're living in an independent apartment setting or whatever. They have the skills to be independent, so they then have their own choice. But the person who doesn't live independently, who is very subject to what programs that are set up for them, their options are to go to a rec program that's set up by the base service unit, where the person walks into the rec center and the program is designed that evening. The goals are set. Everything is handed to them, and they then that is their recreation program.
It seems to me that those of us, again, who are so-called normal people need to be educated and integrated more than we are, and
The only way
doesn't seem to be any programs coming from our end to do that.
Well, here's another example. There's a base service unit in the South Hills that has a recreation bowling program on Wednesday evenings, and Special Olympics has a bowling program on Saturdays. They're both in the same bowling alley.
Mm-hmm.
Both I know athletes, and they're athletes for Special Olympics. They're individuals, okay, that participate in both programs. They like bowling, okay. They do exactly the same thing in both programs, except in Special Olympics we keep score, and then we give them the opportunity to go to other parts of the county to compete in bowling against other bowlers. Okay. Now the Wednesday rec program, they bowl as they do on Saturdays, but there's this feeling and philosophy, or I don't know how to describe it, that one program far exceeds the other program, when in reality both programs are the same.
But both programs are segregated. What I'm saying is, what does a typical 41-year-old do? Do they go to movies? Do they do aerobics? Do they lift weights at the Y? Do they on the regular bowling teams? Those sorts of things. And I think your point about people without disabilities are not aware of a lot of these issues. Part of it is because we've segregated people with disabilities into institutions and separate school programs. And the only way we're going to educate society at large is to get people with disabilities performing competently in community settings.
So you bring up the Y. On Monday evenings we have a Special Olympics program at the Y, which is a totally integrated program at the Y. They're maximum independent adults who for the most part they transport themselves to the Y. They have their individual programs for each of them. They choose to swim, they choose to lift weights, they choose to jog, they choose to play basketball. They do it like every other Y member does it on Monday evening. So I don't see the segregation there at all.
We've got a lot of callers on the line. I've got to take a break, and we'll go right back to the phone lines when we return. I'm Lynn Cullen. This is News Talk 1250 WTAE.